Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar on Round 3 and some application tips from the Yale School of Management MBA for Executives program. We're thrilled to be with you this afternoon from our home here in Evans Hall in New Haven. And my name is Joanne Legler, and I'm the Director of Admissions for the MBA for Executives program here at Yale SOM, and thrilled to be joined by my colleague Maria.
Hi everyone, Maria Stutzmany-Marcus, and I serve as the Associate Director of Admissions. Thank you so much for joining us on maybe a lunch break, potentially. We have people who are calling in and watching the webinar from all across the US and some even internationally.
Well, we're thrilled to have you no matter where you might be, and we also want to acknowledge and thank our two Assistant Directors of Admissions, Liz and David, being so helpful on the back end today. And again, thank you for being here with us as well. Today is really going to focus on tips for a future application. We are lucky enough to have one final round of applications left, and our deadline is March 30th. So we're really going to tailor today's webinar to give you the most ammunition, the best information that you can have to produce a quality application for our Round 3 deadline. So if this is your first time joining us for a webinar, maybe it's been a while, I would absolutely encourage you to go back and watch some of our more less recent or older webinars about the program, about our areas of focus, about the executive assessment exam. We've done some great webinars this year. So I'd encourage you to go back and take a look at those, because we're going to focus mostly on the application process today. And we're thrilled to be able to help you out through this somewhat confusing process and help demystify it a bit for you. But before we dive into the good stuff, it's always great for you to know a little bit about what we have to offer here and what today's agenda is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about that. The opportunity today is really to talk a bit about our community, talk a bit about the admissions process and the timeline, and then really spend the bulk of our time on the application process. So that's what we're going to be working with today, and hopefully that's going to help you not only get a brief overview of what we have to offer at SOM and the MBA for Executives program, but also give you a much more in-depth understanding of what we have to offer in terms of the application process, how to get through all the components. We do want to hear from you, so the Q&A portion of our day today is going to be really important, so please go ahead and submit your questions. We'll try to answer as many as we can live and in person during the webinar, and then give you some tools to contact us after the webinar is over if you choose to do that, or we don't get around to answering your question. And then finally, we'll give you a few next steps so that if this isn't the year for you, but you're getting a head start on a future application, you'll sort of know what to do next. I think the next best place for us to begin talking about SOM is to just harken back to our mission, which is our founding mission for the institution, which is to educate leaders for business and society. This is absolutely the thing that's central to everything that we do here at SOM. Our mission is to educate leaders who are purposeful and mean to have an impact in their organizations and their work and in their lives. I would say everybody really subscribes to this mission, takes it very seriously. It certainly drives everything that we do here, both from a philosophical and programmatic perspective, as well as a day-to-day sort of logistical perspective and how we think about how we're delivering our programs. I'd say if you walked up to anybody in our building and asked them to recite the mission, they could probably do so with ease. And hopefully a large part of your attraction to our program is knowing that we are a mission-driven institution. I think the next thing to talk about, and we'll go into depth a little bit about this with Maria in a second, but who are we looking for? Who are our students, or who is the program best suited for? For us, we think about this as students who are experienced leaders, so people who are at a point in their career where the MBA for Executives makes the most sense. They've had some management experience, had some leadership experience, and are kind of poised at this point to move things forward pretty quickly from here on out. And is this the right time? But we're really looking for folks who are experienced with some leadership and management already under their belt. We're also looking for those who've had a strong trajectory in their career, who have moved up either sort of more quickly than average or pretty quickly, and are poised to become leaders either of a team or an organization. And the need to build that really strong business foundation is now becoming quite apparent. So people who are in line for new opportunities and need to have that preparation to be successful in those roles. And then finally, acceleration and access, people who really wish to grow in their organizations, to have a larger impact both internally and on the society at large, and really have the need for that access to resources that a top-tier business school like Yale SOM has. So I'd say when we're looking for applications or looking at applications, that's a bit of a profile of what we're looking for. Maria, can you share a little bit more about the profile of our current first-year class to better understand who our students are?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a photo of the class of 2021, and because our program really focuses on 3 respective industries and many others through sustainability, but we have healthcare, sustainability, and asset management. And so you can see we typically bring in experienced leaders from each of those different areas. In healthcare, the class is usually filled with physicians, other practitioners, people who are coming in from biopharma, biotech, medical devices, so a wide range. And we really hope that there's the full value chain of healthcare industry so that they can really tackle some of those complex issues when it comes to payment and providers. And so in sustainability, I think we have a number of folks who are coming from the energy sector, oil and gas, a lot of incoming potential applicants and candidates and those who enroll from consumer goods and consumer products, people who've worked in supply chain and procurement. So it's really a pretty wide range in sustainability. And of course, we're thinking about climate change and environmental impact and how can organizations be more responsible in that area. And then of course, in the asset management cohort, we see people from hedge funds, private equity, capital markets, risk and compliance, those who have worked in M&A prior. So again, I just want to stress the diversity of experience and industry, and to share a little bit more about the demographics of the program. While there are 75 students altogether, that's the size of the cohort that we're hoping to enroll each year. Most of our students have about 13 years of experience. So to Joanne's point earlier about mid-level, mid-career folks who are coming through, about 36% are women, and 41 will come in with advanced degrees. So you heard me talk about physicians and many engineers and people with masters in finance come through as well. 13 citizenships are represented, so clearly a lot of diversity in terms of geography and background languages. And then the average age is about 37. And so this has been fairly consistent over the last few years, and I think that what we're seeing is really a continued trend along this line. What else would you add about the class?
So for me, this is a group of really interesting people as well. So as much as we strive to meet all these metrics in terms of talent and ability to be here, I think we're really looking for people who connect with our mission, who connect with our areas of focus, who buy into the idea that this is a 22-month non-transactional engaged program. And so the statistics are interesting. I think we're doing great seeing as many women as we are. We have an enormous number of military veterans in our program as well. But regardless of all of these things that are sort of black and white, what I think we're looking for and what we tend to find in terms of folks interested in our program is a strong connection, again, to our mission, how we teach here, our core curriculum, and that idea that you're not just going to come for class and leave, but that you're going to engage in our workshops and you're going to take that teamwork element so seriously too.
Absolutely. So this is kind of we're shifting gears here, talking from the class, and I know that there was a question that came through to talk about the size of the class. I hope we've addressed that for you. When it comes to the admissions process and the timelines, you mentioned that this is our 3rd round, and before I kick off kind of the conversation about this and get into some of the more details, I wanted to ask you about the unique nature of round 3. What is that like? I think on our staff and in our team, we often field a lot of questions about it.
Sure.
We'd love to hear, and I'm sure our audience would love to hear more about that.
I think it's funny because I always joke and say, when you come to us and say, I'm thinking about applying round 3, we say, great. When you come to us in June or July, you have all the rounds to choose from. And I think one is as good as another. And I think the differences between the rounds really exist in the applicant experience and the enrollment experience and how much time you might have to prepare in a round 1 application versus a round 3 application. From an admissions perspective, there's a lot of myths out there about round 3, so I'm happy to take the time to dispel those right away. One is that no one gets in round 3, and that's definitely a myth. We wouldn't bother having a round if we didn't think anybody would be admitted to that. And I think for us, our model is built to consider applications across all 3 rounds, including round 3, and so that exists for a reason. Some folks don't find out about us until quite late in the process, and then get very excited by the opportunity to consider enrolling just a few months from then. Some people, for financial reasons, can't apply quite so soon, for reasons that might impact their bonus or a potential raise or a potential opportunity to move forward. That might be impacted by signaling that they may be considering doing an MBA. And while you continue to work, while you do this program, the opportunity to ask for time off can be a little frightening. So there's certainly reasons why students choose to avoid earlier rounds, but the myth that nobody gets in is just that. It is a myth, and we're excited to enroll a good portion of our class every year in the round 3 application process. There is also maybe a stigma or a bias against round 3 applicants. That doesn't exist for us. Again, we will always encourage students to apply when they are most ready, so being sort of biased against a round 3 application or making any assumptions about your readiness for the program would not make sense for us. So that's certainly a myth as well. Overall, our advice is going to be the same across all 3 rounds. Apply when you're ready. Apply when your application looks and feels the best that you think it can, well represents you as an applicant to the program. And I think if you decide to apply round 3 and it doesn't work out, we're always happy to offer feedback for future applications, should there be one in your future. If it doesn't work out in one round, regardless of round, there is an opportunity to consider an application for the following year. So in some ways, it's like, well, you have nothing to lose. Give it a shot. But we also understand that this might be sort of a test run for future application, and that's okay too. But stay in touch with us and let us help you be guided along the process to make the best decision that you can about when is the right time to submit.
Absolutely. And I wanted to add something to that, and it's not necessarily along the myths, but it's on something to think about and prepare for as you're considering applying for this round. The turnaround time is really somewhat quick.
Yeah.
And we also start classes in July. So thinking about what you might need to do to prepare for classes in July, as this all kind of takes shape.
Yep, good point.
So to talk about the process itself and what it might look like and the expedience at which we operate in this round. So on March 30th, you would submit an application. That application is read by all committee members, and then we'll go into a committee review, which, I think, and we'll talk more about these components later, but there is a really in-depth review of each applicant, an application. And then of those, through the review, there are many that will be invited to interview. And then we have interview dates in April. And then all of that new data and information is then taken to the admissions committee for another review, utilizing not only the information from the application, but also now the interview information we received as well. And then a final decision is made. So I think that happens really quite quickly. And so I'll share with you some of those dates and the components. So for today, as we're headed into talking and about each of the details for each of these components, please note that you can ask questions. I know that Liz and David are both fielding questions on the back end, so please send them our way. We'll do our best to get to them. But here are some of the timelines for you. So if you apply by March 30th, please mark your calendars for April 17th and 18th for interview dates. Those are the only 2 dates that we have available for interviews, so it would be one of those days as invited. And then we release decisions the next week, so that is a very quick turnaround.
Do move fast.
Yeah. So for today, as you notice on the screen, we have a number of different components which will kick off. Is there anything else that we should add to this at this point?
No, I think for those who may be coming to us with the intention of applying a year from now, would you agree, Maria? These are probably going to look the same next year. We don't really have any large intentions about changing or making dramatic moves away from this structure for next year. So if you are coming to us with the intention of applying for the class of 2023 later on this fall, you can anticipate a similar structure for deadlines and dates.
Absolutely. Great. So we're going to kick off with the resume.
Yeah.
And so Joanne, I wanted to ask you, what are the most important components that you're looking for as you're evaluating and reviewing a resume?
And we've seen a million at this point, so we feel like we've got some really good advice to be able to offer here. I guess my best advice is to not overlook this part of the application. I think it's an easy thing to do to just grab the last resume that you have from the last job maybe that you applied to and submit it. And I think that that's okay for the most part, but I'd also encourage you to think about it and kind of be intentional and thoughtful about it as it relates to an application for admission to business school. We might not need all the detail that might be involved in a resume as you're applying for a very technical job, perhaps. We know quite a few of our practitioners have quite long resumes that include presentations, publications, all the research that they've done. And you're welcome to submit those things, but I would ask you to take a look at your resume and see if the opportunity exists to pare it down down to maybe a 1 to 2 page format. That might not make sense for you based on what you do for a living, but if it's possible, I'd say give it a shot. What we're really looking for here are kind of the highlights, the accomplishments, what it is that you think we need to know that best presents you in a light that encourages us to think about what you are like as an employee, a leader, somebody who's part of a team. If there's information in there that we might not know, perhaps your company's not as well known, maybe it's a startup, perhaps it exists in a country outside the US, go ahead and add information maybe in parentheses that could explain that this is, a small family business or, again, a startup. Maybe you have a side gig and you're an entrepreneur. Anything that helps us best understand your resume is incredibly helpful to us. So give us the tools that we need to properly evaluate your application and understand your work experience in the context in which you think we need to understand it to evaluate your experience to date. I think it's absolutely okay to add all of your work from really when you graduated from undergrad up to now. Again, that might be difficult to shove into a 1 to 2 page format, but do your best so we don't have a lot of questions. Sometimes when we see gaps in a resume or we don't quite understand the timeline, it just opens up the discussion for us to be confused. And so the more information that you can give us. Again, this is part of a holistic application process, so we're not going to look at your resume only to determine your admission for the program, but it can be a really nice snapshot to help us put all the pieces together to best understand your professional experience.
Yeah, and to speak to Joanne's point earlier about career evolution and trajectory, I think that this is a good example of that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think, just to put a point on that.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, and so this is also, so we love reading your applications for many reasons. This is one of the highlights here is to read the essay prompts and your responses to them. So Joanne, what are some of the, best tips and advice that you have around responding to these prompts?
I think our advice is almost always pretty simple, which is to answer the question that we've asked. Sometimes people either are eager to tell us something and they're going to cram it in this application no matter what. And really what we're looking for is an answer to a relatively simple question. It's a question we would ask if we were meeting you one-on-one. It's a question your boss might ask if you were approaching him or her about the opportunity to consider an MBA. So what's your motivation for this? Why is this the right time? What's your alignment with one of our 3 areas of focus? And what are your goals, personally and professionally? So this is a really big why question. It sounds like a simple one, and we really mean for it to be answered simply, but it should be thorough as well. So think about maybe breaking these components down, maybe writing a really long essay and then paring it down from there, but always go back and ask yourself, did I answer the question that they've asked me to answer? Knowing that it will be supplemented with things like your resume, your letters of recommendation, a potential interview. But don't overthink it. Answer the question. We have a sort of smaller word limit there for a reason. We don't need you to kind of go overboard. The second one gives us an opportunity to find a little bit more out about you, about what you're passionate about, what you're interested in. A question I often get, and I think you do too, is what should I write about in the second essay to cite a shocking statistic? Some people will automatically pair it with their work, what they do for a living, and others will go in a total different direction to talk about what they're passionate about outside of work. Both answers are correct. We really want you to just choose something that's motivated you to make a potential change, join a group or an organization. For both of these, I think it's really important to remember the basics, right? Are you a good writer? Can you sort of put 2 sentences together? Can it make sense from start to finish? And so don't forget that. Spell check. Get somebody else to look at your essays. Sometimes when we work so hard on these, we lose sight of it. It's great to get a second opinion just to make sure you haven't made any sort of silly mistakes. Yeah,
Oh, great.
Great. So the next part is our employer approval process. It's actually a pretty straightforward process, but Maria, what sort of things make up employer approval? Why is it a thing? Why do we ask for this? Talk to our audience a little bit more about this.
So I'm going to go directly just to the logistics of it because I think that this is a really critical piece. The only thing that you need to include on this form in the application is your employer's name, their title, their email address, and ultimately this serves as an electronic signature for us. This will not actually be released to your employer until you have scheduled your interview. Yep. So there's a little bit of flexibility in that. To the bigger point of why is this important and why is this here is, we are an MBA for Executives program. And as we have seasoned and mid-career professionals, we also know that the timing of the program is 60 plus days out of the office. And if you haven't had a chance to review our academic calendar, I'd encourage you to download it so you can see exactly how many days that means for you. But it requires a lot of time away from the office, and it means also being engaged in your current employment so that you can then offer value-added discussion and opinion throughout your classes and to your cohort and your teammates. So it is really important for you to be fully employed, and it's also important for you to have all of your stakeholders absolutely championing you in this program, because this is a rigorous program. It takes a lot of time. It's going to be quite intense and fun and wonderful, but we want you to have some of those pieces in place. I think in terms of advice for you now, given that there's 4 weeks out, if you haven't started that conversation, start it this week, next week. All of us are happy to have conversations with you to strategize on ways in which to have those types of conversations. There's also a note here that, sometimes, as you mentioned early, in terms of timing of this application, sometimes you're undergoing massive organizational change. And so the person who you had originally submitted as your employer approval has now changed since you're going to interviews. Yeah. So those are things that we can work with you one-to-one with, but certainly important to get that first stakeholder okay from your first stakeholder. If you were self-employed and an entrepreneur, we imagine that you would sign this and fill this out, so that's just fine. But this form, again, is required for interview, and it's certainly required for enrollment. So this is a really important piece, even though logistically it takes no time to complete. What would you add?
What I would add is that I think, in a way, this protects you as the student as well. When things get a little intense at work and your priorities start to compete with one another, you sort of use this to get back to your employer, to your HR person, to say, hey, you said this was okay. You signed off on this. And so I think in some ways it protects our students who may find themselves at a strange crossroads when things start to get a little hairy, to remind those around you that they signed off to support you through this 22-month process. So I don't know, for me, it's sort of a win-win.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking kind of employers, Maria, a huge part of our evaluation process is to know what others think of you. And this can be really crucial to our understanding of your job and where you sort of fit in your organization. So let's talk about letters of recommendation, both logistics and sort of what their meaning is. What would you say about that?
Yeah, so in this area in particular, I think this is a good tandem along with the employer's approval. We definitely would love to have your recommendation come from your direct supervisor. We think it's really important to better understand not only your character, but the performance and the impact that you've had within the organization and your team and maybe those that you manage. And so I think that this is, if as much as you can and as much as we can impress upon you, that would be very important. I think for your second recommender, I think anybody who has either supervised you in the past, somebody who's been a lifetime mentor that you've worked with, I think any of those who can speak, again, to that character, your leadership potential, and to really the impact that you want to have. One of the things that I see often that I think is really compelling is when people have had conversations with their referees and have talked to them about their values, their aspirations, like what they hope to achieve, what they hope the impact of this program is, and how that aligns for the organization. And so these are bigger conversations to have with your referees. It's not just simply like, hey, can you write me something? And also, on that note, I would definitely recommend that your referee be the author of these. I think sometimes people can get really busy in their schedules, and so they might ask somebody to draft something. I would just make sure that you can find somebody who has the time to write a really thoughtful letter of recommendation for you. I'm trying to think. So we need them by the time the application is due.
We do.
It's really hard to get an overall picture of your performance and your, all of those things mentioned before without these letters. So I would definitely encourage that. There are times when you might need a third referee. So in special cases, which we can all counsel you on, we would accept one. So I guess this is a good example, is if you have a change in management, and so perhaps you've recently had a promotion, you're now reporting to somebody else, but you've only been working under their purview for the last 3 months, then yes, certainly ask your previous recommender. You might also ask your current supervisor, and then when we get to the additional information section, we want to know why you have 3 letters of recommendation. So I think those are my kind of points to this. One question I get is like, are there things that people should not do when it comes to letters of recommendation?
I think you shouldn't ask your best friend. I think even if that person is your best work friend, be careful about people who are not going to be appropriately critical of your work and where you need to improve, because if you weren't interested in improving and growing, you wouldn't be looking for an MBA program. And so you have to find somebody who's willing to point out the areas where an MBA program will have the most impact and why it would be useful for you to do this. So if you work for a family company, it might be tempting. If your boss is a parent or a sibling, that can be a little tough for us too. You might want to find somebody like a client or a non-family member, supervisor, employee, a board member. So just be smart about it. If it feels like it might be a little bit strange or funny, it probably is. We're also happy to counsel you about who might be best to write those letters of recommendation. And for those who are self-employed or entrepreneurs, same thing. Clients are great options for this. What's not great are professors. So we've seen occasionally sometimes when somebody will go all the way back to a master's program, an undergrad program, and frankly with that time in between, it doesn't tend to serve the applicant very well at all.
Right. Good points.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So you mentioned earlier kind of what we're looking for as we're reviewing applications and with our candidates. Academic potential is so important.
Agreed.
And so we have a couple of areas within the application that really have a focus on that. And so testing and offering us your test scores is one of those areas.
That's right.
So what are the key components here? What are we looking for?
You always have said this, and you've been such a champion for those who see this as a barrier to the application process. That's understandable. We're certainly willing to work with you, but this isn't optional. We do require a test. We've always required it. We've never waived it, and it is important for us to understand your academic potential. Yale is difficult. I think it's a rigorous program. We need some pieces of evidence that indicate your ability to be not only successful, but to thrive in this environment. So the test score is one of those things. We would take one of 3, the GMAT, GRE, or the executive assessment, if that's a new term for you. Please start looking it up. It is, I would say, the one that we see most often at this point, but it is a newer exam that is specifically tailored to those considering an executive MBA program. And in fact, we have a great webinar that we just did a couple of months ago with some students who took a variety of tests, so you could listen to their insights into those different opportunities, and somebody from the organization that created the executive assessment and the GMAT, and that person did talk a lot about the purpose for the exam and how it's structured. So I highly encourage you to go back and watch that webinar, and then start looking around. What do you need to make sure that this component is fulfilled for you in the application process? If you have a prior score, note that it does need to be valid, and that means within the last 5 years that it was taken. If you don't have a valid score, you're going to have to try something new, and in that case, of course, we would really recommend the executive assessment. There is some good test prep out there for all of these exams, including the executive assessment at this point. That one's a little bit more limited, so do find out what's on their website, for the GMAC's website, and do the best you can to prepare. On the other hand, compared to the GMAT, the executive assessment requires a little bit less preparation, and the exam itself is a little bit shorter. And I think the addition of the executive assessment to this group of exams has been great and really taken the pressure off of a lot of students. We will require eventually your official scores, so do make sure that you've named Yale School of Management MBA for Executives program as the school that you want your official scores to go to. As you're applying for the application deadline, which is March 30th for round 3, we'll take a self-reported score to complete the application, and then we'll get your official score eventually. So just go ahead and submit that score in the application. We do need a score, so if you decide to apply without one, we're going to have a really tough time being able to process your application in this round. So do make a note of that and prepare to have that exam to us by the time that the deadline arrives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So there's another piece to the academic
Absolutely.
potential, and these are the transcripts. So can you share a little bit more about what we're looking for when it comes to transcripts?
Sure. Again, pretty straightforward. You're going to want to collect all the transcripts that you might have hanging around or you're able to download from your undergraduate and graduate institutions. We don't need the official. We just need something that attaches itself to your application so that we can see your grades and the classes that you've taken in the past. So we will need your undergraduate one. If there's an international equivalent or a translation that's needed, go ahead and send those as well. You need to list everything, so make sure there's a transcript attached to each school that you list that you've attended and gotten credit for. Transcripts, again, unofficial can be fine, but they need to be legit. And I guess what I mean by that is this is not an opportunity to grab a piece of paper or an Excel and make your own transcript. We need something that indicates that it's from the school, that indicates your successful graduation from that school. I know it sounds silly, but that has your name on it, the school for which it is represented. These are kind of all sort of obvious things, but you'd be surprised at what you have access to unofficially. And we do need the things that look pretty legit so that we know that this is somebody who has the proper credentials to be admitted to our program. If you don't have a non-English, or if you don't have an English translation from a foreign university, we will need you to get that. We're pretty smart cookies, but we don't have an enormous bank of language skills in our office, so of course we'll need an English translation, and that'll be required on your end of things. The whole point here is to put these puzzle together and answer the question, is this person academically qualified to survive and thrive in an MBA for Executives program at Yale University? So between the test score, which is a much more recent indication of potential for academic success, and your transcripts, which is sort of a recent and maybe not so recent past indication of your academic success, it helps us answer the question, is this person really ready to be here? Are they academically qualified? Do they have the chops to make it academically? And so that's the question we're trying to answer, and that's why these two pieces in tandem are so important as part of a holistic evaluation process.
Yeah. And one of the things that you say often that I really appreciate is about being good stewards as an admissions committee and really making sure that we're taking into consideration not only our applicants and our candidates, but those who are in the program and making sure that this is a really great place for them to be successful. So.
Yeah, I think that's true. We want to set up everybody for success.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
So we have a couple of questions that go back to letters of recommendation and resume.
Terrific, let's do it.
So I'm just going to take a pause here.
Yeah.
One of them is about, getting a letter of recommendation from somebody who is in a different part of the organizational structure. So maybe not your direct supervisor, but maybe like CEO or somebody above. Like, what does that indicate or signal when that happens?
I think if that's your second letter of recommendation, it can be very powerful to get a letter from somebody who sees the organization from a high level and is able to see you within that. I think if you're trying to impress us, or there's an alum from Yale who you think this is going to somehow make a difference, that's when I would avoid it. So I'd say it's totally okay to get something like that from someone like that if it's meaningful, if it's sort of meaty and juicy and there's a ton of really great anecdotal information in there. If it's somebody who, I always say you walk into the elevator in the morning on your way to work and she doesn't know who you are and can't remember your name, that's a really bad reason if you think it's going to impress the committee. So absolutely fine. Otherwise, again, just looking for you. Where are you in this letter? Are you able to spend time with this person to prep them to write this great letter of recommendation for you? That's not cheating, by the way. That's really giving that person enough texture and depth about your experience there to add value to your letter of recommendation and to your holistic application process. So I'm okay with it, but it's gotta be good.
Yeah. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
The second question I'll go ahead and take, it's coming from a practitioner. So if you are a practitioner and you have residency or fellowship, we actually include that as your work experience rather than your educational experience. So just note that you can list that and we count those years of residency and fellowship as work.
Definitely, you deserve that.
Yeah. All right, next up are interviews. Right. So Joanne, this is like a really key component to our process. And so and after, having just come off of a couple of weeks ago, having had interviews, what would you say about this area?
It's critical. It's crucial. it's going to mean different things for different people. For some, it's quite meaningful. It helps us better understand them, answers questions that we might have had about the application. For others, we're looking for communication skills. We're wondering about their interest and sincerity about applying to our program. But we're trying not to make it scary. It should be fun. It should be a great conversation between yourself and one of our staff members, between our alumni, between you all as you come and you interview as a group as well. So for us, though, it has to be an invitation. So this comes as part of the application process after we've reviewed your application and decided to interview. Unfortunately, we don't have the bandwidth to interview everybody who applies, but for those for whom we think there's a reasonable chance for admission and we'd like to invite into our community, an invitation to interview on campus here at Yale SOM is critical and required. As I mentioned, it's conducted by a few different people, ourselves and our admissions team. We are lucky enough to have wonderful alumni who come and interview as well for us to get to know you a little bit better. It's a great opportunity for you to ask questions about their experience too. Our faculty are sometimes involved in interview days. They like to get to know the pool as well. And the dates are here, so I think the basics still apply here. If you are invited to interview, come prepared. Come on time. Be professionally dressed. Take this seriously. Have your resume with you to refer back to. Be able to answer questions that are on your resume. This is all fair game, and nothing should really come as a surprise. And be prepared with questions for us. It should be kind of a two-way street during the day. And it's a full day. You're going to be with us all day long.
Absolutely. And to add to that, be prepared to engage with, 39 or so other candidates who are all interested in the program, and you're building kind of these relationships and connections. Use it as a networking time, connect with our students, all of those.
Great, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So optional components.
What do you think about this?
Yeah, this is a really neat area that I think we offer within our application, because I think it gives an opportunity for people to really expand on parts that may be confusing.
Sure.
So Joanne mentioned earlier a little bit more about the resume and any gaps in maybe a concern, or you may have switched from one industry to the next, or from one functional role into another, and so we'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah.
This is also a great place to add information about your letters of recommendation and who your referees are. It could also be a place for us to share anything that might be happening within your organization, organizational change that you're experiencing that you wouldn't necessarily add to that first essay.
Yeah.
I think where we see a lot of the additional information is for those who really want to explain undergraduate academic performance. I think that this is an excellent way to tell your story. And so we've had a number of, not to go into every example out there, but I just think that if there are some dings or glitches that you had in that time, please feel free to share. And I think you might, this is, I guess, what this area is not. It's not a time to tell us more about yourself in a way that wouldn't necessarily add to the application.
Yeah.
And I say that kind of loosely because, we're really happy that you had completed the first essay and we read more about your shocking statistic. We've read your resume and your letters of recommendation. So this would be any area that you feel would be complementary to.
Or additive.
Additive.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
I think what it's not too, Maddie, as you were just saying, is not an opportunity that you need to take. If you don't have anything to add that's of substance, it's okay. The optional essay is truly that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that says it all.
Yep.
But if you have any questions about any of the areas we've mentioned, or there's a unique point that you'd like to make, again, we're happy and available to counsel through that. So what's also embedded within the application is an opportunity for scholarship. So if you decide that you want to apply for scholarship, these are very limited and they are partial scholarships, and they're based on financial need, unique merit, unique perspective and merit as well. And so please indicate that by writing a short essay about 250 words within the application, and then you'll also have to complete the pre-application for federal student aid, FAFSA, which I think is done now all online, and I believe the IRS now has a very easy way to kind of connect that information into the FAFSA, which is fantastic. So please fill that out. All of this needs to be done before interviews. I think it's really important that it be completed, otherwise it may delay some of the admissions committee. So please have that done. If you are an international student on H-1B or L-2, we have a separate form, so you can always email our inbox and request that form. We'd be happy to send it to you to get this information.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great opportunity. Our average scholarships are between 5 and 10,000, and so while it may not cover a significant amount, it is a way for us to signal that we believe that you have need, and this is deemed there is merit.
Yeah.
So.
I think too, as we're on the topic of financing, please go back and watch our financial aid webinar with our director of financial aid. She does one for everybody, and then a really lovely separate one for our military candidates that speaks specifically to the nuances of being considered for government aid and yellow ribbon and things like that. So please go ahead and watch those webinars to get a complete picture of financing your MBA.
Yeah, great. Okay. So we are coming up near time, but
Great.
we have some time for more questions. So we have a couple through here, the queue. So we have questions about testing, interviews, and work experience.
All right,
so
let's knock them out.
So what is the average EA score that we are looking for?
Fair question. It's a difficult question to ask, in part because we've only had scores for the last couple of years, so even we're still putting together what makes sense to be an average. So I'll talk more broadly. We meet with a group of other MBA professionals, and we've all kind of coalesced around a 150 that indicates success in the program, and that's from validity studies done with other pilot schools, as well as our own experience here at the School of Management. So we haven't done our own validity studies yet because we haven't had the volume of EA, but we feel like a 10 on each of the 3 subsections of the EA makes a lot of sense for us, and a 150 is something to shoot for. Maria, if somebody gets a 145, what should they do? How would you counsel them?
Yeah, so I would want to know each of the different subsets of scores first, because I think that may play a part. But oftentimes, we may recommend that you retake the EA. We may recommend that you do something like MBA math or take an online like HBS core or the Berkeley Haas course to supplement. The idea here is really that you're ready and prepared for this program. I think also a 145 might signal something if you are within a certain years of experience, or it may be one part of the application that is maybe the only part that we might have concern over. So I think that while we're reviewing holistically, we are really counseling people into one of these different areas, whether it's to retake the test or take on some considerable other type of work. But I think
counseling, though, is a big part of what I'm taking away from your answer, which is call us. Let's talk, because oftentimes people panic when they see the number that they weren't expecting or hoping for and might throw in the towel. I'd much rather have you give us a call and let us talk you through some options than give up altogether.
Absolutely. Okay, so
else?
here's another one.
Yeah.
So having less work experience than the average student, what is the advice through the application?
Depends. Our advice might be to wait. It very well may be a very sort of obvious answer, but don't be surprised if we tell you, gosh, this might not be the right time for you. And really what we're thinking about here is, can we put you in a group of your peers, and can you hang? Can you contribute? Can you be part of that expectation of being a peer with the other 74 people in your cohort? So for us, we do certainly see students who don't meet the average and have great reasons why that might be, and have just skyrocketed in their career that they are leading teams and organizations, and others for whom it's maybe more obvious that they just don't want to leave their job and enter a full-time program, though that might be the more obvious answer. Unfortunately, we don't offer a part-time option here at the School of Management, so I think for us, we'd rather you do a pre-assessment and let us counsel you through this, because there certainly have been great success stories for students who have much less years of work experience, but it definitely raises at least a concern for us to consider you for the program if it's significantly below average, because again, we're really trying to put together peers who are mid-career, those who are leading or are poised to lead and have that management experience. And so it's a tricky one, but I would say get some advice from us before you necessarily throw in an application. We'd be really happy to talk you through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, if we go back to the class slide, I think the average years of experience is just that, the average. And we're really looking to have the most diverse class, and that also adds into years of experience. So we have people on either end. So as Joanne said, call us, we'll chat. If you haven't done a pre-assessment, please do. So the next question is about, does company sponsorship impact the decision on scholarships? That's fascinating.
That's a great question. We don't ask the question. We're never going to know whether or not your company is financially sponsoring you until or unless you tell us. So generally speaking, no. On the other hand, I think fairness is a piece of this here, knowing that our resources are limited. If you know your company has agreed to sponsor you, do you need additional assistance from SOM? And maybe the answer is yes, and maybe it's no. But we don't ask the question, so unless you tell us, we actually don't know. So the simple answer to your question is no.
So, question, and I will take this one.
Okay,
I haven't
great.
started my application or taken the EA. Do you recommend I wait to apply until next year? This is a really good question because I imagine that there are so many people who are very much in the same situation. I would say this would be a phone call immediately. I think generally what I can share with you about the executive assessment is that it takes modest preparation between 20 and maybe sometimes 50 hours. It is a 90-minute exam and the materials are really well done online. But I think you have to consider, your stakeholders, do you have your employer's approval? Do you have the capacity to take on, the studying requirements for this test and really putting together a thoughtful application? I think it can be done. Mm-hmm. We have seen it done before, and those are very unique cases. So please feel free to schedule a call. We'd be happy to talk you through that for sure.
Yeah. Does that segue into our next slide?
It does.
Yeah, so what could somebody do from this point on? We'll talk about next steps for those of you who might not be in the application stage, but I think final advice for me anyway is what you just said, which is why it's such a great segue. This is going to sneak up on you if you're not prepared, so just make sure that you're taking time out of each day to think about how long it might take to put an essay together, getting those recommendation letters, making sure you're emailing your undergraduate school or going on their sort of SIS system to get those downloaded transcripts, those unofficial transcripts. So if you feel like you have the time, great, but do plan ahead. It can sneak up on you, and March 30th will be here before you know it. And so just being thoughtful about the time between now and March 30th is my best advice.
And for me, my best advice is to really do research, learn about the program. If you haven't yet been to campus, I would encourage you to do that. I think coming to this webinar is a great next step. If you haven't done a pre-assessment, do that. Ultimately, learn more about the program so that you have everything that you need to put together a great application. On March 21st, we're hosting an information session, and you can sign up online for that as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We're going to put one last slide up, which indicates we are open to email. You're welcome to go ahead and shoot us any questions that we weren't able to answer on the webinar today, or if you have specific and personal questions. I would say if you haven't done a pre-assessment, we've probably said this 100 times now, but that's a great place to start. Give us a copy of your resume or your LinkedIn profile and allow us to assess your fit for the program. And then that could probably turn into a phone call. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us be helpful. Maria, thank you for being here, and thanks to our staff for helping us produce this webinar today. We wish you the very best of luck if you are considering an application for round 3 or in the future, and we welcome your questions via email. So thanks again for your time, and hopefully we'll see you soon.